Welcome to the second episode of the Creepy Froggy series. This one takes place at the castle in Uppsala. Now, this series is dedicated to graveyards or burial places of various kinds. So maybe you're wondering why a castle is the next place that we're gonna visit. Well, this castle is connected with quite a few stories that have death in them. Some quick facts. This castle dates back to the 16th century. This castle was built as one of several important protective forts during a time when Sweden was becoming a powerful nation in Europe. And that's why it was built on the highest point in all of Uppsala. And this castle has been the site of several important events in Swedish history, especially concerning queens and kings. And this building, what you see now, was the site of the original castle. There was a great fire in 1702 that devastated the whole town, and it nearly destroyed the castle. And after that it took years to rebuild it. Today this castle is the home of the county governor. It's also the home of 3 museums. The Art Museum, the Museum of Peace, and in that building the Vasa Museum, which is named for the king that decided to build a castle, Gustav Vasa. There are also several companies that have their offices inside the castle, especially in this wing. And now on to the death-related stuff. We'll start off with some hidden facts that not everyone is aware of. Because under the castle, or near it, there are hidden rooms. In this area, 4 meters below the ground, there are vaults that are not open to the public. And most people don't even know that they're here. Are from the mid-16th century, and they were the basement of a house where the overlord of the castle lived. He was in charge of the administration of the castle. This overlord's house, or the sheriff's residence as it's also called, it was destroyed in the same fire that wrecked the castle in 1702. And nobody knew that the basements were there, that the vaults had survived the fire, until they were rediscovered in 1976 when a piece of machinery sunk through the lawn behind the castle. Now these vaults are 15 by 8 meters with a ceiling height of about 5.5 meters. One of the doors had been walled with bricks during a time when the basement area was used as a dungeon, a place to put prisoners. And the only way into the dungeon would have been through a hatch in the floor of the sheriff's residence. The dungeon or basement was called the Dark Hole Tower, and the prisoners were all lowered into it via this hatch. It was a dark and dingy and cold place, and the prisoners built makeshift fire pits using bricks from the walls around them, and they're still there. Apart from these dungeons, there are also secret bastions built for protection, and they too stem from the mid-16th century. One is called Styrbiskop, and is located right beneath the Gunilla bell you can see here in front of me. And even though this bastion is quite visible from the outside, not many people realize that it's there because they simply think it's the foundation for the bell. As you enter the bastion through this wooden door, there is a narrow hallway leading into a big room. And the walls, they're made of bricks with small openings in the walls where they would have had cannons to protect the castle with. A stone stairway leads to an upper floor, and the ceiling is vaulted and has partly caved in. The area of this bigger bastion, it was not restored until sometime in the 1930s, and until then it was just a big pile of blocks and stones. It was all in ruins. Legend has it that around 1900 some kids were playing among the ruins, and back in those days there was an opening in a vault on the side, and the kids, they entered the subterranean tunnels via that opening. But these kids, they never ventured very far, usually. But one day they decided to see how far the tunnels went, if they could get to the end of them. Now, in order to not get lost down in the tunnels, they all held on to a long piece of string. And when the boy in front reached the end of the tunnel, he was to tug the string, indicating to the rest of his friends that they had reached the end and they were about to turn back. And so in they went, crawling in a tight space in a long line throughout the ruins. They had some matches with them, but when they had used up all the matches, it got pitch black in there. So in their tunnels they were crawling around on all four in the dark, surrounded by old fallen brick walls, and they waited for the last boy, the boy up front, to tug on the string, but he never did. So eventually they arrested them. They decided to turn back and go back out. They pulled the string to indicate to the boy up front that they were leaving, but the string was loose and they managed to pull all of it back. So the boys, they started calling that boy's name, their voices echoing in the tunnel, but there was no answer. So they all scrambled out of the tunnel, and once they were out, they rushed to get help from grown-ups, but even the adults were unable to find the boy. And since then, this area has been restored, as you can see, and it's been excavated, but no body of a child has ever been found. So what really happened to the boy is, up to this day, unknown. In the castle's infancy, some of Swedish history's most gruesome murders took place in the castle's prison. It's called the Sture murders. A Swedish king, Erik XIV, had decided to get rid of some members of a noble family, the Sture family. The king was afraid of anything resembling treason, and for that reason he put a lot of noblemen in prison. Add to that a growing paranoia, and you have the ingredients of this murderous soup. King Eric had gotten to his head that the Sture noblemen were trying to get him thrown off the throne. So he had them arrested and tried for high treason. After the trial, they were placed in the prison in Uppsala castle. But before the judgment could be made official, the king, sick with paranoia, came to the castle to kill them himself. And he did it. He stabbed one of the noblemen while he was pleading for his life. And then the king ran out of the prison cells to order someone else, guards, to kill the rest of them. And while all this was going on, a prisoner in an adjacent cell heard the whole thing. He had heard how the nobleman had been singing to himself moments before the angry king stormed into his cell and stabbed him. And after that act, the king fled to the forest where he was acting very strangely and very confused. He was running around thinking he was stalked and that astrological prophecies were coming true. Now we're heading to the location of the main story of this episode. You can see in this picture that the castle really is built quite high up on the hill, and it's in these parts here that in May of 2001 the remains of a forgotten battle came into light. It's what we can call the Forgotten Battle. Some digging was going on in the hill where the castle is built on, when the workers uncovered skeletal remains, and they called the police, who called the local county museum, who sent their archaeologists there to check it out. It must have been a relief to the digging crew who had found the bones that the bones turned out to be ancient and not the result of a modern-day murderer. Now, after carbon-14 dating had been done on the bones, it was determined that they came from the 16th century. Most of these skeletal remains turned out to be from males in their 20s and 30s, and the bones, they showed traces of deadly wounds from weapons, and a large amount of the men had been struck in the head, since many of the skulls had severe injuries to them. Now, these findings, they brought on a large-scale investigation, and the archaeologists excavated a significant portion of the hill beneath the castle and found several mass graves, and it's believed that even more bodies are buried there than were discovered during the excavations. So, what happened to all these people, mainly young men, who were buried so quickly in shared graves on the hill beneath the castle? Well, after lots of investigation and reading through history books, it was deducted that all these hundreds and hundreds of men that were buried here beneath the castle, they were probably soldiers that had taken part in a battle in the 16th century. To be precise, it was the Good Friday Battle of April 6th, 1520. The Swedes were battling the Danes on that day, and it was the last time a battle of that kind was fought here in Uppsala. The Danish soldiers were placed in Uppsala awaiting orders from the Danish king to strike against Stockholm, which is some 70 kilometers to the south. And what they didn't know was that Swedish soldiers were gathering on several locations near Uppsala. And together, the Swedish soldiers headed for Uppsala, attacking the Danes from 3 directions. And even if this was in April, all of this happened during a blizzard. Now it's April now, and it's hard to fathom that it was in the middle of winter, but it was a blizzard. The Swedish soldiers, they did quite well to begin with, but a series of events changed their luck, and they were driven away from Uppsala by the Danish soldiers. And both sides lost soldiers during the battle. The Danish side had some 2,000 wounded and dead, and the Swedish side probably had a lot more than that. But the wintry conditions made it impossible to bury the dead straight away. And because of that, and because of political reasons that made it forbidden to bury some of the dead in proper cemeteries, the dead bodies were left on the ground to rot. So what's a castle without any tales of ghostly sightings? Even if I don't believe in ghosts in a classical sense, i.e. the spirit of dead people, I do believe in the spirit realm. And when people say that they have experienced strange, otherworldly things, I don't think it can always be explained naturally, but rather supernaturally. So here are some experiences that people who have worked in the castle in modern day times have had in the castle. A woman who was living in a flat in the castle was in the kitchen preparing a meal when she heard heavy footsteps behind her. When she turned around, nobody was there. So she continued cooking, but once more she heard the footsteps, and this time they were closer. Again, she looked around but couldn't see anybody. She was home alone, so there shouldn't be anybody else there anyway. Yet, the steps could be heard again, and after having come towards her, they stepped past her into another room, and then into another room, and another. They didn't stop until she turned on every lamp in the flat. The same woman had another very scary experience one evening in another part of the castle that is used as a wardrobe. A sudden wind swept through the room and seemed to fill the clothes in the wardrobe, making it look like the clothes were moving around as if filled by unseen people. The Vasa Museum, which is located in the old original castle, in the area where the vaults are called the Sture vaults after the Sture murders. It's been the location of a lot of weird noises and other happenings. Like the time when some employees were cleaning up inside the museum when they heard heavy thuds on the metal roofs over their heads. The thuds were so heavy that the wooden beams in the ceilings vibrated. The staff went outside to see who was jumping on the roof, only to find the roof empty. When they returned to the museum, the thuds continued. Adding to the strangeness of this case is the fact that a vibrator gauge was put up in the museum to record any possible vibrations from nearby construction work that might be damaging the castle. But those vibration gauges are said to have only recorded vibrations in the middle of the night, around 2 or 3 a.m., when no construction has been going on.